Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. In today's video, I'll be using Scrapbook.com's brand new Valentine paper pad. It's a brand new year, and the next holiday coming up is Valentine's Day. Scrapbook.com recently released their Valentine paper pad. It's available in 6x8 and also A2 size. This is a really cute collection, lots of pinks and reds. I've been making lots of cards using the A2 paper pad, so mine is very well loved. One of the stamp sets I'll be using is also brand new. It's called Sweet Valentine. Currently, I only have the stamp set, but there are coordinating dies. If they're not available now, they are coming very soon. And I will have links for all of the products I used in this video in the description box below. I have 5 card designs to share with you today. For card design number 1, using the adorable cupcake pattern paper for the background, I'll layer it on some dark brown cardstock, and the brown cardstock is from Scrapbook.com's Neutral Smooth Cardstock paper pad. The cupcake paper is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and the brown cardstock layer is A2 size. I'll start off by stamping one of the cupcake images using the Sweet Valentine stamp set. If you're not a fan of coloring, this is a great set since you simply layer the different solids and detail stamps. I grab my mini MISTI, I have a piece of white cardstock, and I'll hold that in place with a magnet. And I'm starting with the solid of the cupcake wrapper. The ink color I use is Distress Oxide Scorched Timber. This color matches very closely to that dark brown color on the pattern paper. After stamping this solid piece several times to get a nice solid impression, I clean the stamp using Scrapbook.com's pink stamp chamois. Then I wipe down the wet area of the MISTI using the crafty cleanup cloths. Next, I'll stamp the lines of the cupcake wrapper. I started off using Scrapbook.com's dark chocolate ink color, but it wasn't quite dark enough, so I did switch to Scrapbook.com's black ink. This is their premium dye ink. And yes, I completely dropped the ink pad, but luckily I only dropped it on the MISTI and not on my piece of cardstock. After cleaning up my mess, next I'll stamp the frosting of the cupcake. I'm using Catherine Pooler's Quartz ink. This pink matches beautifully with the pattern paper. It looks a little dark right now, but the ink does dry lighter. And the final step is stamping the sprinkles. There are 2 different options. There's hearts and also the traditional sprinkles. I'm going with the traditional sprinkle look. The ink color I'm using is Terracotta by Catherine Pooler. As I mentioned earlier, there are coordinating dies for the stamp set, but I don't have them yet. So instead, I'll simply fussy cut out this image. And this is a very simple image, so it didn't take very long at all. Using Scrapbook.com's Ergonomic scissors, and I'm leaving that white border around the image. That way it stands out against the background. I'm really not a big fan of fussy cutting, so I am looking forward to having the coordinating dies. For a sentiment, I've already stamped Sweetheart, and this sentiment is from the Sweet Valentine stamp set. I used the same terracotta ink color by Catherine Pooler and stamped it on the solid pink pattern paper in the Valentine paper collection. Wanted to add just a little extra detail. I selected one of the sweet little faces that are included on the stamp set, and I'll stamp it in the upper right hand corner. The ink color I'm using is Scrapbook.com's Dark Chocolate. This is one of my favorite brown ink colors. I'll be making a shaker window. For the window, I use Scrapbook.com's Nested Stitched Scallop Frames die set. For the frame, I use the solid red pattern paper that's included in the Valentine paper pad. I I put some clear double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the frame. This is the 1/8 inch size. I'll attach a piece of acetate. Now I'll add some of the 1/8 inch foam strips. This is the 2mm thickness. And I'm cutting the foam using Scrapbook.com's brand new titanium scissors. These are great for cutting all those sticky adhesives. And it's also great for paper, ribbon, so many wonderful uses. It's a nice strong pair of scissors. Inside the shaker window, I'll add some pink sequins from Spellbinders. This is their pink opalescent color. They have a gorgeous iridescent finish on them. I'm only adding a small amount since I don't want to cover up the sentiment. And once I place them inside that piece, almost all of the sequins turned upside down. So I will go through and flip over those sequins. I'm sure it's fine either way, but I do prefer them to have the cup side facing out. And I was having so much fun crafting, I forgot to hit record for a couple segments in this video. After adding the sequins, I sealed them in place with the sentiment pattern paper piece. I'll put Artis glue on the back and adhere this scallop frame on the front of my card. And I did place a large acrylic block on top for some added weight while the glue dried. And the other segment I forgot to hit record on is me adding the little cupcake in the lower left-hand corner of the shaker frame. And I did pop up the cupcake image using some foam dimension. For card design number 2, I am using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from Cards TV. It's sketch number 57. And if you're interested in any of the sketches I use in this video, I share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. The link is in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. Now, I'm not following this sketch exactly. I am using it more for inspiration. For the background of my card, selected the grid pattern paper. I'll layer that on some of the light pink solid pattern paper. Then I'll layer it again on some black cardstock. The adhesive I'm using is Scrapbook.com's Deluxe Adhesive Roller. This is super sticky adhesive and the roller is easy to use. It is not refillable though. Scrapbook.com does have the same type of adhesive in a refillable roller. For the featured pattern paper, selected this lovely design with lots of birds. Some of them are holding hearts and others are holding flowers. I'll layer that piece on black cardstock. Before adhering this piece on the card, I'll first add some scrap cardstock pieces on the back side. Putting a larger piece at the top, narrow strip at the bottom, just in the area where it goes over that narrow strip of the red cardstock in the background. For a sentiment, I'm adding the word hello. I stamped it using black ink on the light pink solid pattern paper, and this stamp is from Scrapbook.com's Sunny Lane stamp set. I'll layer this piece on black cardstock, put adhesive on the back, and adhere it at the bottom of the bird pattern paper. So here's where you can see I'm changing up the sketch design. For a final finishing touch, I'll add a small banner in the upper left-hand corner of the bird paper. Cut a fishtail at the bottom, then I'll cut the right side in slightly at an angle, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. I'll put Artis glue on the back and adhere it in place. And I'm putting it slightly above that bird pattern paper square. For card design number 3, the card sketch is from Sketch Saturday. This is number 766. And for my card, I did cut those rectangle pieces just a little bit larger than what's indicated on the card sketch. I selected 2 pattern papers for the rectangles, the heart cherries, and also the heart lock and keys. I'll layer each of those pieces on black cardstock. And for my cardstock layers, I generally add an additional 1/8 of an inch. So that layer would end up being 1/16 of an inch. If you prefer a wider border, you could add an additional 1/4 of an inch. For the background of my card, I have a piece of white cardstock, and for that wide strip in the center, I'm using some of Scrapbook.com's ombre pattern paper. I love this paper collection so much. I selected the green that goes light to dark. I'll add that piece in the center of the white cardstock piece. And that white cardstock piece is 3 7/8 of an inch by 5 1/8 of an inch. I'll layer it on black cardstock, and that's an additional 1/8 of an inch. Then I'll layer it one more time on an A2 light pink panel. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. This card will have lots and lots of beautiful pattern paper and cardstock layers. I bring holiday cards to the residents at a nearby retirement home. So every holiday I need at least 90 cards. I started working on Valentine's Day cards right after I finished my Christmas cards last year. I'll add a handwritten message on the inside of each card, and it'll be happy mail for the residents. Now it's time to add the 4 rectangle pieces, and I'll first lay them out on my card to get the placement evenly spaced. Then one by one, I'll put adhesive on the back and adhere the 4 rectangle pieces in place. And once I have them down, you can see how I did cut these pieces larger than what the sketch indicates. But I really like how they look, and the pattern paper designs are super cute. For a sentiment, I'll be adding Be My Valentine, and I'll adhere the sentiment on a pink heart die cut. For that little bit of shine, I use Scrapbook.com's pastel glossy cardstock. I love this cardstock. It adds such beautiful detail to your card or project. I will pop up the heart using foam dimension. I have Scrapbook.com's small foam squares in the 1mm thickness. I'll make sure to get good coverage on the back, remove the release paper, and add the heart in the lower right-hand corner. For the sentiment, I'll cut a fishtail on the right and left side. I also have a scrap piece of white cardstock that's about the same size as the sentiment banner. I'll put Artis glue on the back of the sentiment banner, adhere that scrap cardstock piece in place. I do need to cut it just a little bit smaller. And the only reason I'm adding that cardstock piece is for a little more stability. I stamped the sentiment on some fairly thin white cardstock. I'll also pop it up using foam dimension. This is Scrapbook.com's 1/4 inch foam in the 1mm thickness. And I'm so sad, but this roll is almost finished. The 1/4 inch size was a little bit wider than I needed. Instead of grabbing Scrapbook.com's 1/8 inch foam strips, I'll simply cut this piece in half. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 4, the card sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 637. For the background of my card, I selected the pattern paper with pink and red hearts, and they have sweet little faces inside, and those are the same faces that are included on the Sweet Valentine stamp set. On the right side of the card, I'm adding a narrow strip of the notebook pattern paper. For a little bit of separation between the 2 designs, I'm adding a very narrow strip of the silver holographic paper from Scrapbook.com. It's just under 1/8 of an inch wide. I cut that strip just a little bit longer. We'll simply use a pair of scissors and trim off the overhang. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and layer this piece on the solid red pattern paper. I'll flip it over, put more adhesive on the back, and add my card front onto a card base. For the 3 small square pieces, I cut these out from the light pink solid pattern paper. And before I round the corners, I'll be stamping a heart inside each of the squares. Trying to decide if I wanted the small heart or the larger heart, and I do end up using the larger heart from the stamp set. I'll be using a mini MISTI, and inside this MISTI I have Waffle Flowers Grip Mat. This is the size that fits perfectly inside the mini MISTI. The grip mat has a tacky surface, so it'll hold your cardstock or pattern paper piece in place. That way I can ink up the stamp several times to get a nice solid impression, and I don't have to try to put a magnet around the side. The ink color I'm using for the hearts is Terracotta by Catherine Pooler, and I'll stamp the heart inside all 3 of the pink squares. I have just one more heart to stamp, and I am inking it up at least 2 times to get a solid impression. Before moving on to the sentiment, I'll quickly clean off the stamp using the stamp chamois. Instead of stamping the face inside the hearts like the pattern paper, I'm using 3 of the smaller sentiments: Be Mine, Sweet, and Hug. I'll use Scrapbook.com's black ink for the sentiments. I'll start with the sentiment Sweet, and I'm trying to get it centered inside the heart. Now I'll ink it up and stamp the sentiment. And this is a brand new ink pad, so it's very juicy. I'll clean off the first sentiment. Now I'll grab Be Mine, change out the square, and I don't need to put this square in the same position since I am using a different stamp. So I'll line up Be Mine inside the second heart, ink it up using the black ink. And I'm using a pair of tweezers to remove the square from the grip mat. If your grip mat loses its tackiness, you simply wash it with soap and water. I own several MISTIs and mini MISTIs, and I keep a grip mat inside one of each of the sizes. Super handy to have. So I'll stamp the final sentiment Hug, clean off the stamp, and you may notice my stamp chamois is very colorful. Some inks do wash out, others stain, but even if the color stains, the stamp chamois still works great. So now it's time to round the corners for all 3 of the squares. I'm using a corner chomper, and I selected the 1/4 inch corner size. This is super easy to use, and you can cut heavier weight cardstock with it. I will be layering all 3 of the squares on some silver holographic paper from Scrapbook.com. This is the same paper I used for that narrow strip. And just to save time on the video, I've already gone ahead and rounded those corners. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and layer the pink squares on the holographic squares. For one of the squares, I didn't get that layer perfectly spaced. I was trying to pull it up, but it's not going anywhere. As I mentioned, this adhesive is super sticky. And here you can laugh at me. I didn't even notice that I have the sketch upside down while I finished the rest of the card. But I did have it right side up at the beginning when I was making this card. Before adhering the 3 squares on the right side of the card, I'll first put a scrap piece of pattern paper on the left side. I'll also pop them up using more foam dimension. Grab my almost finished 1/4 inch foam in the 1 millimeter thickness. And with this card, I did finish it off, but luckily I do have a backup. I'll make sure to get good coverage on the back of each of the squares. Need to grab that brand new roll here. This is one of my favorite foam adhesives. I love having the 1 millimeter thickness. If you prefer more dimension on your card, they also have their foam available in 2 millimeter and 3 millimeter thicknesses. Now I'll remove the release paper and add the 3 squares on the right side of the card, trying to get them evenly spaced. I placed all 3 squares down first. I'll remove the release paper and start with the square at the bottom. I'm adding the 2 line sentiment in the center. I have one final square to adhere. Remove the release paper and add the heart with the sentiment Sweet at the very top. Then for a final finishing touch, using some white twine from Doodlebug Design, I'll tie a bow. And no matter how many times I do this, bow tying is not my gift. I'll use the titanium scissors, trim off the tails. Then to adhere the bow, I'm using some glue dots, and I did fold the glue dot in half since I need a very small piece behind the bow. I'll add the white bow at the bottom of the center heart. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For my final card design, number 5, the card sketch is from Dawn Griffith. And I like this sketch since it already has several of the measurements already added on the sketch. For the background of my card, selected the grid paper with pink and red flowers, and they have happy little faces inside them. I'll layer that piece on the solid red pattern paper. For the smaller rectangle piece, I'm using the pink, red, and white grid paper. And I'll also layer that piece on the solid red pattern paper. I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. The card sketch doesn't indicate the background pattern paper sizes. The floral piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and the red cardstock layer is A2 size. I'll be adding 2 circle die cuts, one in white, the other in the same red solid pattern paper. I will be stamping some of the heart lollipop images on the white circle. So I'll grab my MISTI that has Waffle Flower Grip Mat in it. We'll start with the pink heart using the same ink colors, Catherine Pooler's Quartz and also Terracotta. And for the stick of the lollipop, I'll be using Catherine Pooler's Pebble ink color. I'll stamp the pink heart on the left side, and I will ink it up a few times to get a nice solid impression. Now I'll add the red heart on the right side, and they will overlap just slightly in the center. Next, I'll stamp the 2 sticks. Start with the pink lollipop, then I'll add the stick on the red lollipop. And they will overlap just a little bit at the bottom, but that area will be covered up with the sentiment. I'm inking up the lollipop sticks twice to get that nice solid impression. After stamping the final lollipop stick, I'll clean off the stamp using the stamp chamois. And I decided to use the fun little faces, and I'll put one on the inside of each of the heart lollipops. The ink color I'm using is Scrapbook.com's black ink. And I made sure to open that ink pad very carefully this time so I didn't accidentally drop it on my stamped images. So there are the cute little heart lollipop images. Now I'll put Artis glue on the back of this circle and layer it on the red circle. The circle dies I use are from Waffle Flower. It's their additional circles die set. Now I'll put more Artis glue on the back and adhere the circle on the left side of the card. And just the very left end of the circle will go off of the grid pattern paper. For a sentiment, I'm adding "You Are My Favorite." Use black ink, stamped it on some of the light pink solid pattern paper. I'll cut a fishtail on the right and left side. And for the 3 small banners that go underneath the sentiment, one I used the red solid pattern paper, another I used one of the silver holographic papers, and the final one I used some white shimmer cardstock. I'll cut a fishtail on the bottom of each of the banners. I'm using Scrapbook.com's Ergonomic scissors. The end is super sharp, so make sure to put the cover on it when you're finished. Before adding the banners, I'll first adhere the sentiment, and I will be popping it up using foam dimension. The very right and left side will go off of the circle, and the left side also goes off of several other layers, so I will add some scrap cardstock pieces on the back side. I'll add a small piece on the left and the right side. And since I will need to boost up that left side just a little bit more, I'll also add another layer of foam dimension. With just the foam dimension, that right and left side will slightly dip down since they're not at the same level. So it really does help to add those cardstock or additional foam layers. I'll put Artis glue on the back of that little cardstock area and adhere the sentiment in place. So here you can see the very bottom of the lollipop sticks, but I will cover that up with the 3 small banners. The white shimmer cardstock banner will go on the right side, and I'm using my fingers to curl up the very end of each of those tiny banners. The silver holographic banner will go on the left side. And a couple of them are a little too long, so I'll simply use a pair of scissors and trim off that top area. Now I'll add the final red banner in the center. And I can already see it's way too long, so I'll first trim off the top. For embellishments, I'm adding some pink jewels. These are from Pink Fresh Studio. It's their Ballet slipper color. Matches beautifully with the pattern paper. I have the jewels stored in one of Scrapbook.com's embellishment jars. This is the larger size. I'll pour out a small amount in the cap of the jar, and I'll select one of the smaller sizes of the jewels. I'll put 3 small drops of Artis glue in the upper right-hand corner of the grid paper. Pick up the jewels using the wax tip end of Scrapbook.com's Craft Pro Pick tool. Then for a final finishing touch, using a white gel pen and adding a little highlight on each of the lollipops. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. I love how this one turned out. It's my favorite from the whole set. Now here's another look at the 10 cards I made using Scrapbook.com's brand new Valentine paper pad and also their Sweet Valentine stamp set. This is a beautiful collection. Now I have several Valentines ready to go for the year. The card with the bird paper and the sentiment hello, it could be used for any theme throughout the year. I may stamp Happy Valentines on the inside. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links in the description box below. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.